What do Barbie, Darth Vader, Pokémon, and Power Rangers have in common, besides feature movies? These are some of the vintage toys that are worth big money today. So if your Beanie Baby retirement plan didn't work out, maybe you have one of these toys lying around that can command a small fortune. Barbie in the 50s. Just as the 1950s were coming to a close, a 6-inch, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl next door with an eye for fashion popped up on store shelves. Produced by Mattel in 1959, Barbie's popularity exploded after its release and continues to this day. Barbie would even go on to get a dream car, a dream house, and a dream man named Ken. Now, if you were lucky enough to hang on to that cherished Barbie, there's a chance it's currently worth a pretty penny. But don't go cashing in that blonde bombshell for a Lambo just yet, because not all Barbies are created equal. If you were among the very lucky and happen to be hanging on to a 1959 number 1, as in the very first Barbie, and she's in mint condition, she could be worth around $25,000. Decked out in a black and white strapless one-piece bathing suit and matching black heels, the original Barbie is not only posh, but worth a nice bit of coin. But we're not finished with Barbie just yet. If you're not into blondes, a mint-condition 1959 brunette ponytail Barbie, known for having less fun, sold for $6,710 on eBay in 2014. The reason these fashionistas are so valuable is that they weren't mass-produced, making them limited in number, sought after, and quite valuable. And to think, the original Barbie sold for only $3, which would be about $32 today. G.I. Joe in the early 60s. The decade that introduced the world to the Fab Four was also responsible for producing some of the country's most beloved toys. During the 60s, a toy arrived in stores that was as much a hit with the boys as Barbie was for the girls: G.I. Joe. Hasbro enlisted the real American hero for the first time in 1964, and Joe went on to become a certified hit and was the very first action figure. The original G.I. Joe toy line was more reality-based than future incarnations and featured members of every branch of the military, complete with appropriate gear perfect for taking down any enemy. Today, G.I. Joe can have you racking in real American dollars. Lots of dollars. However, it's not an American hero that will bring in the big bucks, it's a Canadian. The Canadian Mountie Joe has a market value between $1,500 to $2,250 for a mint-boxed figure. The proud Canuck comes dressed in full RCMP gear, which means he's sporting that same hat that Pharrell Williams made famous a few years back. Anyway, the reason good old Mountie Joe commands such a high value is he was a limited-run Sears exclusive, making the proud Canadian very rare. Oh, and if you can get your hands on the Russian, the German, or the Japanese, yes, those are their names, and no, Hasbro wasn't the pillar of creativity in the 60s. They each have a market value of between $750 to $1,000, boxed and in mint condition. But if you have one of the more common G.I. Joe action soldiers released between 1964 and 68, they can command up to $400 in its box in great condition. Oh, and if you really want your mind blown, the original G.I. Joe prototype action figure sold for a whopping $200,000. But since that particular Joe is a prototype, he doesn't really count. Star Wars ruled the 70s. Blondie, disco, Halloween, the movie, not the actual day, and some classic toys just for good measure. Yes, we must be in the 1970s. The toys of the 70s widely varied from cool electronic games like Simon to the super stretchy and aptly named Stretch Armstrong. The 70s also gave us the first mass-produced video game console for the home, but we'll talk more about that later. But when it came to the toys that really grabbed kids' attention in the 70s, it was Star Wars toys. Star Wars was, and continues to be, a cultural phenomenon. So when the first line of Star Wars action figures first hit stores, kids did everything they could to get their hands on any Star Wars figures, playsets, and vehicles they could. Now, anyone who knows about Star Wars knows where this is going. While Star Wars figures have become quite the collector's item since they first launched, the original 12 Star Wars figures were only released in small numbers, which, of course, was almost a guarantee the toys would go up in value. Today, these can be worth large sums, beginning with Darth Vader's little boy. Oops, spoiler alert. An original mint condition Luke Skywalker still in its card can get you anywhere around $1,500. But if you happen to find a rare Luke with a telescopic lightsaber, it can be worth closer to $25,000. And when it comes to original figures like Han Solo and Darth Vader, they can be worth over $1,000. The force is strong with these ones. However, there is one figure who's prized above all the rest. Yes, Boba Fett, once a throwaway character first appearing in the lesser-known Star Wars Holiday Special before showing up on the big screen in The Empire Strikes Back, the character became an instant fan favorite. So it makes sense that his action figure would be highly sought after. Boba Fett is one of the most valuable action figures to come out of the 70s. The 1979 L-slot Boba Fett rocket-firing prototype in mint condition has a market value of $525,000, with a recent sale exceeding $1.3 million. Only a small number of these Mandalorian descendants were ever produced, and none actually hit the retail market. Feeling the force of these nostalgic toys? Then take a quick sec to like and subscribe. Every click counts. Now, let's keep moving through the decades and see what other vintage toys are worth big bucks. Let's keep it in the 70s. What does Steve Austin, no, not the wrestler, and Pac-Man have in common? They were some of the most popular toys that the decade had to offer. As popular as Star Wars was back in the 70s, there was more to life than tiny versions of your favorite Jedi. And you need not look any further than the $6 Million Man. The TV series debuted in 1973 and ran for 5 seasons. The show followed the exploits of U.S. Air Force Colonel Steve Austin, who was given bionic implants after being injured in a jet testing accident. With that kind of plot line, a toy line was inevitable. The $6 Million Man action figure came packed with all the cool bionic gizmos and accessories perfect for recreating your favorite episodes. While that Steve Austin figure you kept in mint condition all these years may not fetch you $6 million, depending on the model and condition, the market value for the figure can reach as high as 1,000 big ones. And since one of the most popular storylines involved the bionic Bigfoot, a Sasquatch action figure can be worth as much as $900. Sticking in the 70s, it's time to play some video games. And no, we're not talking about pumping quarters into the machine at the arcade. 1977 saw the release of the Atari 2600, which brought the arcade to your living room. Now, just glancing at the small, plain black console with wood paneling, it may not seem like the Atari 2600 would be very valuable, but retro gaming consoles and games are highly sought after. Unfortunately, Atari 2600s aren't as sought after as an original NES and will likely only get you between $100 to $200 in its original packaging, as the price does vary. When it comes to the games, on the other hand, especially rare ones, games like Air Raid can land you around $7,000, with a complete new in-box version selling for over $30,000. Other 2600 games that are worth big bucks include Eli's Ladder, worth up to $1,700, Ultra Vision Karate, which can be worth up to $4,000, and Birthday Mania, which can go for $15,000 or more. The big-time value is due to the fact that the chances of you having a copy of these games is pretty rare, as they're not only old, but most people who owned an Atari tossed out the games when Nintendo hit store shelves. 80s cartoon toys. Of all the decades, the 80s was the era for producing the most iconic toys and, of course, video games. The entire decade seemed to be toy-focused, with many cartoons and comic books posing as children's entertainment, but were actually 30-minute commercials, like G.I. Joe, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and Transformers. Now, a discussion about 80s toys wouldn't be complete without talking about the Transformers and the most prized retro gaming console out there, the NES. The Transformers were big, really big, with an appropriately large history. Originally a Japanese toy, the line was repurposed for America with a brand new mythology. The Transformers were more than robots in disguise, they were gold mines in disguise. Take the fearless leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime. An original G1 line Optimus still in its packaging can be valued as much as $2,000, depending on condition. Now it's time to talk about the Nintendo Entertainment System. Before the PlayStation, Xbox, and PC gaming, there was the NES. The original Nintendo was leaps and bounds beyond anything Atari had produced, and the little gray box wasted no time taking over the gaming world and saving the video game market after a massive market crash. While usually selling for a couple $100s, this little bundle of 8-bit joy can be valued from $500 to $2,000 for a mint console, depending on its game bundle. The NES changed home gaming, pretty much setting the standard. And, well, if you happen to have an original NES lying around, consider yourself lucky, as they are pretty rare. Softer side of 80s toys. The 80s wasn't all about action figures and video games. There was also a wave of cute and cuddly toy lines such as the Care Bears, Cabbage Patch Kids, and My Little Pony. Care Bears were plush stuffed animals, each with their own color and tummy symbol that visualized their personality. The bears also had their own cartoon on TV, just like every other toy line in the 80s, including My Little Ponies. Although waning in popularity among collectors, some Care Bears can still have you rolling in cash. A great example is an original Playful Heart Monkey, a Care Bear cousin, which can be worth from $500 to $1,000. And an original Tender Heart or Cheer Bear can still be worth a couple $100s. Of the original 6 My Little Ponies, released in 1982, it seems that Bluebell is the most coveted, with an unopened version produced for Spain selling for over $1,200. If you have the Diamond Dreams or Baby Game Time pony from the late 80s, you could be sitting on $500. And as for those Cabbage Patch Kids, early dolls that feature the signature of creator Xavier Roberts with their original adoption papers and birth certificate can be worth $1,000 or more depending on condition. All in on Pokémon in the 90s. Vanilla Ice, Pulp Fiction, Nirvana, Saved by the Bell. The 90s produced plenty of pop culture classics and plenty of classic toys, which could be worth plenty of dough. Let's get this started with a bang. Pokémon. The ultra-popular anime was a merchandiser's dream. Toys, games, and trading cards. Yup, Pokémon cards were a huge hit as kids rushed to the stores to collect their favorite Pocket Monster set. These trading cards have a massive nostalgia-driven market, and combined with all the ultra-rare Pokémon out there, this has made the cards very valuable. In fact, if you search through your closet and come across a first edition Charizard Holo in tip-top condition, you could be staring at a jackpot worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Other 90s Pokémon cards that have sold for over $100,000 include the first edition holographic Charizard, and, of course, the famous Illustrator Pikachu card purchased by Logan Paul for the equivalent of about $5 million. Now, we can't leave the 90s without talking about a certain action series phenomenon, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. 90s kids who wanted to reenact the exploits of Jason, Tommy, and the rest of the gang got their wish, and Power Rangers action figures were on every kid's birthday and Christmas list. Today, if you still have your Power Rangers figures and accessories, you could be sitting on a cash cow. Early Bandai figures and Zords are highly sought after, especially if they're in mint condition. A pristine Green Ranger, for example, is worth around $300 to $800, while the Megazord is worth between $350 to $450. As the demand for these little pieces of childhood grows, and large chunks of change being a big possibility, check those closets and look in the attic because you could uncover an actual treasure of toys. To keep watching more Now and Then videos, stay right here. Here are a couple of choices we think you'll like.